Welcome back to Plugged In Australia, the podcast that plugs you straight into the electric vehicle revolution happening right here in our backyard. I'm your host Jamie, and today we've got something a little bit extra special for you. A bonus episode because the momentum in electric heavy vehicles for road transport hasn't been nothing short of electric itself over the past few months. Today we're going to be talking prime movers, B-doubles, and the massive rigs that keep supermarkets stocked, construction sites running, and goods moving across our vast continent, now doing it with zero tailpipe emissions. If you've ever wondered how those 40-ton beasts can go electric without grinding to a halt on the Hume Highway or losing money on every kilometre, this episode is for you. What we'll do is we'll start with the fundamentals for anyone who's more familiar with passenger EVs than heavy haulage, and then we'll hit the headlines, record single charge runs, Australia's biggest electric trucking depot in the works, some major fleet orders from the likes of Toll and Linfox, Volvo firing up local production in Brisbane, some off-grid solar-powered depots in WA, and the homegrown innovation from Janus Electric that's turning existing diesel trucks into battery swap champions. We'll make sure to include all the facts, figures, and developments. We're going to stick to from July 2025 onwards. Things change, things get updated so quickly, there's no point going much further back than that. So, stick around to the end for what this means for drivers, operators, the environment, and your next grocery delivery. Let's get into it. Okay, so to start us off with, let's get everyone on the same page before we talk volts and kilowatt hours. In Australia, the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator, also known as the NHVR, defines a heavy vehicle as a truck or combination with a gross vehicle mass, which we'll refer to as GVM, from here on in, over 4.5 tonnes. However, today we're zooming in on the serious end of the spectrum, the medium and heavy rigid trucks, prime movers, and multi-trailer combinations that form the backbone of our road freight network. A rigid truck is a single unit vehicle. It's a cab and cargo body on one chassis. These trucks are generally flat tops, curtain siders, which have those soft sides that can be pulled back with, as in curtains. You have your Pantex, which are your solid ones, generally refrigerated trucks. And then you have tippers, hauling your gravel and sand to your construction sites. Now, these typically have GVMs from 8 to 26 tonnes. Then come the prime movers, the powerful tractor units, I guess you could call them, you see hooked up to semi-trailers. Add a second trailer with a dolly in the middle, and you've got a B-double, common on our highways, capable of carrying up to 68 tonnes or so, depending on the route. Out in regional Queensland, Northern Territory, or WA, road trains take it further, which is your prime mover pulling 3 or 4 trailers, sometimes stretching 53 metres long and grossing over 100 tonnes. These are the monsters that move iron ore products, livestock, grain, and fuel across thousands of kilometres of outback roads. Why does this matter? Australia is one of the most road freight-dependent nations on Earth, second only to the United States. Road transport handles roughly 3/4 of our domestic freight tasks by volume. Heavy vehicles may make up only about 3 to 4% of the total registered vehicle fleet, but they travel billions of kilometres every year and consume a disproportionately large share of transport fuel. Recent analysis shows heavy rigid and articulated trucks account for around 22 to 23% of all road transport fuel, despite their small numbers in the fleet. Now that translates directly into emissions. Transport as a whole is Australia's third largest source of greenhouse gases and is on track to become the single biggest emitter by 2030. Road freight alone contributes a massive chunk, think tens of millions of tonnes of CO2 equivalent every year, with freight tasks projected to grow significantly by 2050. Electrifying these heavy haulers isn't just a nice to have, it's going to be essential for hitting our net zero targets while keeping shelves stocked and exports moving. Now, for the average listener who might picture a semi-truck as just a big car, here's the scale. A typical diesel prime mover can burn 40 to 60 litres of diesel per 100 kilometres when fully loaded on highway runs. Now, that's not just expensive at current diesel prices, but it's also pumping out NOx, which is a particulate matter, and CO2 right into our cities, ports and highways. And drivers sit in that cab for 10 to 12-hour shifts, breathing it all in. Electric versions give you instant torque from the electric motors, means they pull away from lights or climb hills without downshifting and losing speed. No idling noise at depots, no diesel smell, and maintenance drops dramatically because there's no gearbox oil change, no oil changes for the engine, way fewer brake jobs. That's thanks to the regen braking, and obviously far less wear and tear on the engines or the motors for the electric ones. However, electrification isn't plug and play like a passenger car. These trucks need huge battery packs. We're talking 300 to 700 kilowatt hours compared to your 60 to 100 kilowatt hours in a typical EV. That adds weight, which is why the Australian government have introduced mass limit concessions of 1 to 2 tonnes extra for heavy vehicles to offset the battery mass and keep your payload competitive. Now, charging isn't a 30-minute coffee stop either. Depot charging is often overnight, 50 to 150 kilowatt, while highway megawatt charging systems, also known as MCS, are emerging for quick top-ups on long hauls. So that's the landscape. Heavy vehicles are the unsung heroes and villains of our economy and environment. Now let's see how the electric revolution is rewriting the rules. Okay, now let's look at the why. And it's crystal clear when you look at the numbers and the real world performance we've seen since mid-2025. First, emissions. Road freight is responsible for a massive slice of transport emissions, around 1/3 to about 38% depending on the exact calculation. Electrifying even a portion of the heavy vehicle fleet delivers outsized wins because these vehicles do so much work per unit. Then take the total cost of ownership, or your TCO, which is my favorite part. Electricity is dramatically cheaper than diesel per kilometre, often 60 to 80% less on an energy basis when using renewable sources. Maintenance savings stack on top. Electric drivetrains have much fewer moving parts, no exhaust system, no diesel particulate filter to clog, no AdBlue, which for those that don't know is a separate liquid that you put in a separate tank when filling your diesel, and then the truck then adds it into the fuel mixture to reduce your emissions. You've got regenerative, I struggle with that word so much, braking means brakes last longer. Fleet operators are already reporting 50 to 60% lower operating costs over the life of the vehicle in early trials. Then you have performance, which is where electric trucks really shine for Australian conditions. You've got instant torque from the get-go. We're talking hundreds of newtons of meters available the moment you touch that accelerator. On the Hume Highway's long uphill sections, diesel trucks often drop to 60 to 70 kilometers an hour under load. And if it's steep enough, and if you have an older truck, you can get down to 30 kilometers an hour. That's why on some of these roads, you see trucks can only stay in the far left-hand lane, or if it's a 3-lane highway, can only stay in the left lane and the middle lane. Can't go in the right-hand lane, because otherwise you're just going to block everything up. So electric versions maintain highway speeds much more easily. Drivers report arriving fresher because there's no constant gear shifting, less vibration, and zero exhaust fumes inside the cab. Quieter operation also means less fatigue and better community acceptance. Imagine fewer noise complaints near residential areas or distribution centres. And that's heavily to do with the exhaust brake or compression braking, known as a Jacobs brake, that you hear trucks when they're slowing down. It does sound quite nice, but not so much when you're trying to sleep. Energy security is another big one for Australia. We import most of our diesel. Electrifying everything means we can generate that energy domestically from solar, wind, and hydro, right here on our rooftops and in our grids. One projection notes that switching the entire heavy vehicle fleet would only require about 20% more national electricity generation, which is easily met with renewables we're already building. Driver appeal matters too. Trucking has a skills shortage. Younger drivers who grew up with smartphones and EVs are more attracted to clean, high-tech cabs with tablet interfaces, smooth acceleration, and lower physical strain. Companies using electric fleets are finding it easier to recruit and retain talent. Now, of course, there are challenges. We'll cover those later. But the momentum since July of last year shows the tipping point has arrived. Sales of heavy-duty electric trucks in Australia jumped significantly in late 2025, with dozens of new developments proving the tech works in our unique conditions, our long distances, heavy loads, hot climates, and everything from metro deliveries to interstate line haul. Okay, let's talk original equipment manufacturers, which is your OEM. The big brands bringing purpose-built electric trucks to Aussie shores and, increasingly, building them here. Volvo Trucks leads the charge. In May to July of 2025, Linfox placed Australia's then largest order for electric heavy vehicles. 30 prime movers consisting of 29 Volvo FM electric models and 1 FH electric. 10 of those were delivered in May 2025 to Linfox's Willawong depot in Queensland, marking the biggest single delivery of electric heavy vehicles at the time. These trucks offer up to 540 kilowatt hour battery capacity, which is around 300 kilometers of real-world range, and they have GCM ratings of up to 50 tons. So this is perfect for your smaller B-doubles with metro and regional work, and the FM is suited to inner city and distribution, while the FH handles open road multi-trailer combination. What's even bigger, Volvo announced it will begin manufacturing heavy-duty electric trucks at its Wacol facility in Brisbane starting in 2026. The first time these vehicles will be built in Australia. 10 of the Linfox orders will carry the Australia-made badge. In December 2025, the Clean Energy Finance Corporation backed this with a $70 million package to support discounted leasing, improve residual values, and help depots install charging. And that's really going to help for uptake. Also, as we mentioned in a previous episode, Toll Group is proving the scale. In February 2026, which is now, they launched 5 new Volvo FE electric rigid trucks in partnership with Asahi Beverages at the Forestfield Distribution Centre in Perth. These 12 pallet taut liners will handle metropolitan beverage deliveries, kegs, beer, liquor, completing over 36,000 deliveries per year. Each has a 270 kilometre range on a single charge and replaces diesel trucks, collectively cutting 142 tonnes of CO2 annually. 3 dual-port 60 kilowatt DC chargers were installed on site, and this is part of Toll's $67 million national commitment, which was co-funded by Arena's Driving the Nation program, which has already seen rollouts with Coca-Cola, Coles, BlueScope, and Origin Energy. Toll now operates the largest third-party deployment of battery electric heavy vehicles in Australia. Mercedes-Benz is in strong with the eActros range. The eActros 300 offers a 336 kilowatt hour battery pack, which has 3 modules in it, and up to 300 kilometers range in loaded conditions. This is ideal for metro and regional prime mover or rigid work. Centurion Transport's arena-funded project at Hazelmere in Western Australia deployed 30 of these. So they got 20 eActros 6x2, 5 eActros 300 4x2 rigids, and 5 eActros 4x2 prime movers. And just for those that don't understand those numbers, so the first number so you got 6x2, that first 6 is the axle count. So no, it doesn't have 6 axle, it means wheel ends. So you would have, obviously each axle gives you 2. So 6x2 means it has 3 axles, and then the 2 part of it is the drive. So it means even though you have 3 axles, only one of those back axles gives you drive, and the other one would be what they call a lazy axle. So it'll lift up generally when there's no load, and that sort of saves the wear on those tires. And then the 4x2, so 4 wheel ends, which means 2 axles, and then obviously that only 1 rear axle, so one of those axles has drive. Bit of a weird one because you would think that the first number would be how many wheels, but generally the back ones are dual tyres, but they just count that as one rather than two. I don't know. I don't make the rules. The setup is fully off-grid, 4.35 megawatt rooftop solar, 10.32 megawatt battery energy storage system, and 15 chargers, which are mostly 50 kilowatt with two 150 kilowatt fast units. Now, this tackles grid constraints head on and provides real high mileage data through to 2027. Scania offers the 25P rigid with up to 300 kilowatt hour and 250 kilometer range for urban work, with heavier European spec options importable. Other players include dedicated battery electric truck manufacturer Windrose, which think of Tesla semis, and that's basically what it is, what it looks like at least, and the similar sort of concept. They have a massive 729 kilowatt hour packs, and they're promising 670 kilometers at a high GCM, which is fantastic. And then you've got lighter to medium options from Fuso, Hyundai, through their Xenient, which is a hydrogen, which we talked about hydrogen yesterday, and some other emerging Chinese brands. The 2025 market guide from the car sales business confirms the lineup is maturing fast, from urban rigids to genuine line haul prime movers capable of Australian GCM limits and road train duties. Local assembly and concessions are making TCO parity arrive sooner than many expected. Now, no discussion of Aussie electric heavy vehicles is complete without Janus Electric. This homegrown company is tackling the biggest barrier for existing fleets, which is the high upfront cost of new trucks and long charging times. So Janus takes diesel prime movers, typically less than 15 years old, due for an engine rebuild, which generally happens at around 800,000 to 1 million kilometers, and converts them by removing the diesel engine and gearbox and then installing an electric motor and drivetrain and fitting their proprietary exchangeable battery system. Cost is comparable to a traditional diesel rebuild, up to 70% cheaper capital outlay than buying a new electric prime mover. The batteries are swappable in just 4 minutes at Janus charge and change stations, which are powered generally purely by renewables. They have a humongous solar array on the roof of their facility there, which is used to charge the batteries. They also then feed that energy back into the grid in a sort of amber style system when the price of electricity is expensive. The specs are impressive. Converted Class 8 prime mover delivers a range of around 400 to 500 kilometers depending on load and terrain, with up to 60% reduction in lifetime maintenance and operating costs. You've got no oil changes, fewer brake jobs, cooler running temperatures, and the batteries are modular and upgradable as new cell tech arrives. So the current ones last around 8 years before they are swapped out. However, 8 years in battery technology is like a lifetime. In Australia, Janus has 25 plus converted trucks already operating in heavy applications, cement, mining support, and they even have a truck in logging in South Australia. They've demonstrated the world's heaviest electric truck conversions and are scaling them. By their own estimates, 50% of the Australian road transport fleet could be electric by 2030 using solutions like theirs. In February 2026, they announced further orders in California worth around $1.6 million Australian, with trucks becoming operational in Q2 of this year. And it's proof that their tech travels well and positions Australia as an exporter of heavy vehicle electrification know-how. For fleet owners sitting on perfectly good diesel prime movers, Janus offers a swap-and-go pathway without waiting for new truck deliveries or massive grid upgrades. It's a circular economy in action. Reuse the chassis and the cab, electrify the powertrain, keep drivers in familiar vehicles while slashing emissions and costs. The batteries are offered as a battery service, so the truck company doesn't own the battery. It's just you pays for each day that they use that particular pack, and they're only charged for the energy that they use. So if the truck's driving around and has only used 50% of its battery, rather than trying to go back to its depot and think, right, we've got to use the other 50% tomorrow, but we're going to run the risk of running out. No, you go back into the swap station, you swap, and the system, the technology knows, right, Cement Australia, who is one of their customers, this truck's only used 50%, so therefore you'll only get charged for that 50% of electricity that you used. So you're not trying to, use the rest of it, because you've got to get the value out of it. And then obviously, because it's batteries as a service, as technology grows, you are just going to get the new technology there. You're going to get the higher battery density, the better technologies. If LFP gets to a stage where it's dense enough to be used in these applications over NMC, if sodium, for example, gets to that point, it just goes in there, and the truck gets a little software update to say, hey, FYI, different parameters on your voltages and things like that, and the truck goes off like nothing happened. There's some fantastic YouTube videos from Everything Electric that Robert Llewellyn recorded, I think it was last year, and it just gives you all of the data that I gave you, but with some nice visuals to see the battery swap happening with the forklift. They are also working on an automated crane system, basically. So you drive into the warehouse, the stacking cranes come in, take the batteries out, put the batteries into charge, and put you with charged ones. And I think from memory, it's about a minute to a minute and a half, and done. Off you go. So I guess the only real drama with the Janus thing, if I'm playing devil's advocate, is that you have to go to one of their stations to do the swap. Now, theoretically, if you were a large fleet, you could very easily just have these containers, because at the moment, the batteries go into these charging containers. You could have these containers at your depot, in and out, and no problem. You wouldn't need to go to Janus for that sort of thing. Though, obviously at the moment, early days, so it's just in one central location. But, you've got a Linfox depot with 300 trucks running out of it. There's no reason why you couldn't have all those solar panels on your roof of your distribution center and change your batteries yourself, especially if it's 4 minutes. Most truck drivers have a forklift license, and, one day of just a bit of training and away you go. Now, the proof really is in the driving. In late October 2025, New Energy Transport, which is Australia's first zero-emissions trucking company, completed what they call the longest single-charge heavy road freight delivery in the country. Now, a 36-tonne load on a Windrose electric prime mover travelled 480 kilometres return from Picton, which is south of Sydney, to Beresfield in the Hunter Valley and back on one charge. Now, here's a really good one. Average highway speed was 98 kilometres an hour. And then, for those that don't know, all trucks are limited to 100 kilometres an hour. So this is 13 kilometres an hour faster than typical diesel runs on the same route. The truck was significantly quicker up hills, saving about 20 minutes in each direction for a 12% overall time improvement and 40 minutes round trip. It was whisper quiet with almost no vibration or fumes. Multi-Equip's National Compliance Manager David Muir, who supplied the poultry load, admitted he started skeptical. Quote, "I still love proper diesel trucks, but this thing was light years ahead. The driver said it was just so easy to drive. Less noise, less vibration, no exhaust fumes. They arrived feeling pretty fresh." End quote. Electricity used was a fraction of the diesel equivalent, and the run proved zero-emission freight at diesel competitive prices. New Energy Transport, co-founded by David Bleakley and Frederick Fairson, has secured a site in Wilton, which is southwest Sydney, right on the busy Hume Highway corridor. Construction of Australia's largest electric trucking depot begins mid-2026. It will start with capacity for 50 heavy electric prime movers, scaling to 200 by 2031. It will have an on-site solar. They're aiming for a 3 to 5 megawatt system, plus grid renewables with high-speed chargers that can replenish 600 to 700 kilowatt-hour packs in under an hour. legally says by combining low-cost renewable energy, high-speed charging, and electric prime movers, we offer zero-emission freight at diesel-based prices. We're positioning ourselves right in the middle of this extremely dense corridor. And as we mentioned before, so Toll and Linfox continue to scale beyond their Perth Asahi launch. They've added multiple Volvo Electrics for Coca-Cola, Coles, BlueScope Steel, and Origin Energy's LPG deliveries throughout late 2025 and early 2026. Linfox's arena-supported project deploying 26 Volvo FM electric prime movers and 25 chargers of about 60 to 360 kilowatts, and that's in Laverton North, which is in Victoria, Adelaide Railhead, and Willawong in Queensland. Each FM presents an estimated 65 tonnes of CO2 per year. That's equivalent to taking 15 cars off the road. Also, Centurion's Hazelmere depot in WA is fully operational with its 30 Mercedes eActros units running on 100% renewable off-grid power, providing invaluable data on real high-mileage performance without straining the local grid. Now, of course, this is a small section of the trucking industry, a very, very small section. However, these deployments show electric heavy vehicles are no longer just pilots. They're in daily revenue service, delivering beer, steel, groceries, and more. Now, no conversation is complete without the but. Range, charging speed, and grid capacity are the big three. For depot-based urban and regional work, which is the majority of heavy vehicle kilometres, overnight charging at 50 to 150 kilowatts works perfectly. Toll and Asahi's 60 kilowatt dual port units are a pretty good example. For true interstate line haul, we need megawatt scale charging hubs along key corridors. Sydney to Brisbane, Melbourne to Adelaide, Sydney to Melbourne. Arena's Driving the Nation program is funding exactly that. Shared hubs, first prime mover specific ones emerging in Melbourne's west, and support for fleets to trial. Centurion's off-grid solar plus BESS model shows how to bypass network upgrades entirely in suitable locations. And BES stands for Battery Energy Storage System. Sorry, a lot of acronyms there that are just rolling straight off the tongue. So yeah, you still use your grid connection. Most smaller industrial areas, so smaller businesses that might only have 2, 3, 4 trucks, you're going to have usually a 3-phase 300 amp service, which is about 70 kilowatts. However, you're going to have much larger systems there. I know a lot of industrial units have 1,000, 1,800 plus amp services. You know, that's 400 megawatt services there. So, you know, plenty to stock those batteries up, and not even need to worry about a battery. You know, if you've got 100 trucks and they're all coming in at different times, you know, a lot of these prime movers will back their prime mover up to a bay. You could then very easily leave that trailer there. It's got to be unloaded or reloaded or whatever it is that you're doing. You might need to have a break through your logbook. Or heavy vehicle drivers have mandated a break and rest periods. You could unhook that trailer, leave that trailer there, take your prime mover over to the charger. If you're on a megawatt charger, for example, plug it in, go and walk inside and have your break. Go to the bathroom, have some lunch, scroll Facebook, listen to an electric vehicle podcast. You know, you could do anything. You don't have to stand there, pump, do all those sorts of things. All right, back on track. Upfront costs do remain higher. However, leasing packages, government incentives, and falling battery prices, plus residual value support from the $70 million Volvo deal, are closing the gap fast. Mass concessions help payload. Driver training is minimal because the trucks drive pretty much just like a regular automatic, but with a crap ton more power. The 98% of Australian trucking businesses that are small to medium operators benefit hugely from conversion options like Janus. No need to buy new. All right, now I know incentives are not everyone's favourite topic. Everybody sort of says, oh, they should be able to stand up on their own, but you need to remember that it is a brand new industry. You know, when we went from horses to cars, Governments stepped in, governments helped, and so it needs to happen again. And so federal and state governments are stepping up. Arenas driving the nation has committed hundreds of millions since 2024, with major transfers flowing into the 2025 and 2026 projects. The December 2025 Clean Energy Finance Corporation partnership with Volvo, which we mentioned before, it accelerates local manufacturing and fleet uptake. The mass exemptions, the stamp duty relief in some states, and potential future ZEV sales targets are on the table. Economically, this creates jobs. Assembly in Brisbane, charging infrastructure installation, battery recycling, renewable energy tie-ins. For operators, you got lower fuel and maintenance, means more competitive rates or higher margins. We have reduced oil imports, better air quality in both cities and near highways, and a more resilient supply chain when global fuel prices spike. By 2030, we could see 30 to 50% of new heavy vehicle sales electric or zero emissions if the current momentum continues to hold. Full fleet turnover will definitely take a lot longer. However, conversions and battery as a service modules will speed this up. The future is fleets mixing OEM new build electrics for high utilization routes and converted swap battery electric trucks for others, all running on sweet Aussie sunshine and wind. And that brings us to the end of this special bonus episode. I really do hope you've learnt something new. Heavy vehicles is definitely something I have a little bit of not a passion, but it's an industry that I work in personally, so I have an understanding of it here in the basic sense. It's definitely not going to be easy. The trucking industry is a very conservative, very old school industry where people do not like change. They love their manual or they love their Jake brakes. That's just how they are, and not an industry that is going to be easy. Now, obviously, these big multinational corporations like your Toll, your Linfox, and all those sorts of companies don't have that sort of mentality. So they can just get in, get it done, and off you go. But a lot of the smaller businesses, you've got a lot of owner drivers, they're just not interested. So I'm hoping that this gives you a little bit of an insight and a little bit of information in regards to heavy vehicles in general and into the electrification of this segment. It's just going to be a very important part of the puzzle moving forward. If you have any suggestions or any feedback, I would love to hear from you. info@pluggedinaustralia.com.au. And until the next time, stay plugged in and stay charged. Ci vediamo.